ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another important episode of Bonfire Chats. I'm Donna Tetreault, your host, and today we have a truly exceptional guest with us. Alexandra Ali Fantl is not just a dedicated school counselor, she's a beacon of kindness, empathy, and responsibility. Her passion for promoting student well-being and fostering growth is unparalleled. Ali's expertise extends beyond counseling. She's a coach, and she's guiding students to navigate life's challenges. Ali's heart thrives on building trust and meaningful connections with her students, both in academics and personal growth. With a career dedicated to student well-being, Ali has touched countless lives, including her own children. Her mission to help young people thrive academically and emotionally through open communication and a balanced, health-focused lifestyle. Today, Ali will be our guide as we explore the vital topic of how to talk to your teen about sex. Oh gosh, I can't wait for this, Ali. Her wisdom and compassion will illuminate the path to nurturing healthy, informed conversations with our teens. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to talk to you about this important journey.
Donna, thank you so much. I am really excited. I know this may sound different for some people, but talking about comprehensive health and sex education is actually one of my favorite topics and favorite conversations. As you mentioned, I'm a parent of two little ones, so I am on a different place in my journey of talking about health and sex ed with my own children. But I do have a lot of experience talking to teens and families about these topics. So let's dive in.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I've got a 14 and a 15-year-old that I told you about, two boys. So I am very interested in this conversation. The first thing, though, you do say is you have to think about the importance of open communication. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about talking to teens about sex, I think we all have this sort of idea in our head of the big talk. Like there's going to be one big talk where we're going to get it all right and we're going to say the right things and we're going to scare our kids into knowing exactly what to do and all about sex. When in reality, I think that building a relationship with your children is probably the most important place to start when it comes to health and sex ed. And listen, I think I'm speaking to you, Donna, but all parents who are listening to this, you are the expert on your own children. You know them best, you know your family best, you know your family's values, and I really honor that. And I'm sort of here to bring some different ideas or explore some different ideas about things to talk about, ways we can talk to our students, our kids, and ways to build trust and more communication.
Ali, it's really important. Earlier, you told me that this is not just a one-time talk. Can you talk to the fact that this is just something that has to be part of the conversations within the family? And when do you really want to start this talk?
Well, not to make anyone feel badly if you haven't yet, it's not too late. But I believe that this is a conversation that starts from the very beginning, from when your child is born. And I say that, when I say that, I don't mean that we're talking to our 3 and 4-year-olds about what the act of sex is or what sexual intercourse is. That is not what I'm saying. But when we talk about sex, sex is a very broad, vast idea. It's many things. And when we are talking to our little ones and teaching our little ones, we are already teaching them about what consent is and what safety is, what accurate information is, and all of that will start guiding them on their journey to be able to make really safe, healthy choices for themselves. So for instance, when I'm talking about my own children, we talk about consent all the time. What feels good for their bodies, when it's okay to hug, asking permission before hugging or kissing someone, learning about sharing, learning about talking about feelings, and that sort of falls right into our emotional support. So that emotional literacy and being able to talk about feelings is so, so important in building communication and building relationships. and getting to know their own bodies. And I think we'll come to this a little later. I mean, we're going to talk about boundaries and privacy, but children understanding their own bodies and being able to name accurately their body parts, to me, feels like safety and protection. We want our children to know their bodies, to know what feels good, to know what feels bad and what isn't safe, and to be able to talk to us when something dangerous is happening to them. So again,
continue. Yeah.
Yeah, so starting young, but right, I don't think there is the big talk. I really don't. And I hope that actually helps take a little pressure off of parents, because I don't know, we all come to the table with our own experiences and our own memories of maybe what that big talk was for us. I'll share personally that my big talk was with my mom. We were sitting in the car driving to soccer. I was probably a freshman in high school. A freshman in high school. And she took it right from a book. I found the book later. It was highlighted. And it said something like, you know that as a girl, when you have sex with a boy, you release these chemicals that make you fall in love with the boy, and the boy doesn't always feel the same way back about you. So I bring that to the table in a little bit of humor. And I just want to say there are things that I love that I will also take from that conversation. I love that my mom wanted to protect me. I felt the love. I felt it was coming from a caring place. But when I think about it, I think about things I want to do a little differently with my own children. And I want to empower them. I want them to, and here's what I feel is so important. I want to open a door to conversations. I don't want to open the door, have one talk, then shut the door. I want this to be a beginning to continue that conversation, normalize the language, make us all feel a little more comfortable, and sort of integrate it into different facets of life. So I know that's a lot, but also, like I said, I hope it takes off a little pressure. There's not just one chance, one opportunity to have a conversation and then it's over.
No, I love this. And it's just reiterating, I think, for me as a mom, thinking about, I remember a book that we read when my kids were toddlers. It was called I Am the Boss of My Body. And so it's by Patty Fitzgerald. And it really did talk about how, you really are the boss, and it's talking about that consent part, and then the language as well that you talk about. So it is interesting that when we think about that sex talk, you highlighting for us that this is really all foundational stuff that we can get to. It does kind of relieve that pressure. So I thank you for pointing that out to all of us. It's really good information. When you think about starting these conversations, how do you choose the right time and the place for these discussions to make sure that you're comfortable as the parent and not bringing in that anxiety, and then make sure that your teens are comfortable?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. So for your own comfort, kind of like I said, reflecting back on what your experiences were, how it made you feel, what you wish you knew, what you wish it felt like, talking to friends, brainstorming, practicing with a partner or friends or family members. And then something I talk a lot about is sort of testing the waters a little bit with your child, with your teen. So I don't know about you, Donna, but I know a lot of parents out there sometimes have a show they like to watch with their children. And they're testing the waters with using the characters from the show and asking your teens questions about them. So sometimes it's a lot easier for kids to talk about other people, like their friends, like characters from a show, than it is to talk about themselves. So sometimes that's a really nice starting point. And I'll also say there's so many good shows out there right now that parents can be watching with their teens that are going to bring up all kinds of sex and health ed topics in really interesting, sort of provocative, fun, funny ways that will allow opportunities for you to open conversation. So some that are on the top of my head, Sex Education, that's on Netflix, is just so good.
Okay.
show Big Mouth, which is it's an animated show. And this is for older teens, certainly, and something to be watched with parents, but it's going to bring up all these topics that maybe you don't have to bring up on your own, but they're little touch points for you along the way to talk to your teen.
That's really interesting. And does that really kind of help with the normalization of it all? Can you talk about other ways you can normalize this kind of discussion in your home?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're seeing it happen to other people and realizing they are not the only ones. So things are happening in their life they may feel are totally strange, they may feel alone, they feel like no one else in the world knows what's going on. To see it playing out somewhere else with someone else can be really helpful and empowering. And then to kind of examine, again, like let's say we're looking at a character on a show, to examine that character's choices and then sort of what happens after. So how a relation changes, how emotions change, what are potential consequences of making that decision can be really helpful. Because when it comes to relationships and a lot of topics when it comes to sex, there's a lot of gray area. And we talk about healthy decisions, we talk about good decisions, right decisions, but again, sometimes it's not clear, it's not always so black and white. So to explore that around another character, around a friend, is helpful.
Before we go into breaking down the age groups, I do want to ask you, should it be both parents in this conversation? Should it be the same sex parent? I mean, like, I have two boys. Is this something that my husband should handle? Or, talk to me about how, I mean, I would think, because you're saying to normalize it, it should probably be both of us, but can you talk to that?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think in an ideal world, I would say, yes, of course, you and your husband should be doing this together with your boys. That is amazing. That's awesome. And I think when we look back, sort of historically, you imagine like, well, I have two boys. I guess dad's going in there to give the sex pep talk, right? But I don't know. I don't know if that's the feeling you want to raise your boys with. I want to believe that you want to raise them in a way where they not only know themselves really well and can advocate for themselves and understand their own bodies, but understand the bodies of all humans and whoever they might be engaging in relationships with. And it's probably important for them to hear from your experiences as well as a woman, what that was like, or what that is like, excuse me, for you and your experiences, and what that means and how it's different too. So I'm a huge proponent, especially in the younger years too, of starting. When I teach health, I don't split students by gender. I do have a very clear image of my head. In 5th grade, all the girls went with the health teacher and all the boys went with the PE teacher, and we got deodorant and we learned about menstruation, and the boys learned about wet dreams and they got deodorant, and we never learned about the other gender, about the other sex. So it sort of clouded everything in this bit of mystery. And I think we need to break down that mystery for our young people.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think that's so, I mean, it's so smart and it makes sense. Like, just every person is a person and a human being and sexual. And so, yes, I love that. So, okay, let's,
Body
sorry.
feel like this is the most important topic. So the fact that we have so much shame
Yes.
talking about the human body is wild, right?
Yeah, it really is. I know. We've got to come out from under the rock.
I feel it too. I'm not saying I'm different or above that. I feel it myself, but I'm working to kind of break through that because I want it to be different for my own kids.
Yeah, and I grew up in an Italian Catholic family, so you can take from that what you think my sex education was, which was not a lot. So I love that this is evolving. So let's talk about like the early adolescence, like ages 13 to 15, those kind of conversations, or tweens.
Yeah, so I think depending on the biological sex of your child, puberty can look different at these ages, right? Oftentimes, a biological girl is, growing and changing a little earlier than a biological boy would be, and it's really important to talk about those things and talk about the changes. Hopefully, they've had a lot of that in health class. Hopefully, you've started those conversations, but just absolutely normalizing that the body is changing and hormones are changing, emotions are changing. It is okay to be having mood swings. That is all normal and okay. And I think that's incredibly important. And talking about relationships. So we have that. So again, talking about consent, boundaries, and respect, but we can kind of have it on the next level, right? So with little kids, we're talking about sharing and hugging. And so we can have it at the next level. And consent and boundaries and respect, peer pressure, decision making, our 13 to 15-year-olds are starting to be faced with new challenges and new social situations. Whose houses are they going to? What is unsupervised? Who are they getting in cars with? And so it's really important to be able to have open conversations with them and also let them know what your boundaries are as well, your safety boundaries, and what's okay and what's not. And always bringing it back to safety is your number one concern for your child.
Safety's number one concern. When we talk about, having friends over and, staying in this age range, and is it okay for doors to be closed? Like, how might you educate parents in that, like when kids are in your home and what your values might be? Can you talk to that?
Gosh, it's a really good question. And the truth is that I don't feel like I can tell any parent what to do in their own home. That is absolutely your choice. And again, you know your children better than anyone else does. And you may come with your own set of family, culture, religious background. And so you need to do what aligns with that as well. Um, it's a really tough one. It's all to your comfort level. But again, like if you have rules and boundaries, it's okay to say, like, if your door is closed, if your door is closed, here are the things that I hope and expect for you when the door is closed. These are the safety measures we need to be taking. I need you to demonstrate to me that you are responsible enough, that you are knowledgeable enough, and that you respect and have consent for others. And it's probably a conversation with another family too, right? So it gets really tricky because you have someone in your home with their own parents, with their own comfort level with things. So it's a really hard one, and I don't exactly know how to answer that. And I feel like if I were to give an answer when my own kids were 13 to 15, who knows what I would do at that point either. So it's a really tough one.
Yeah, and I think that just talking about things like this, kind of demystifies what, we might think is quote unquote right or wrong. And I like that you're saying to, look at what your family values are, and kind of knowing your kid. Um, when you talk about that, knowing your kid, and putting up those boundaries, what exactly do you need to hear as a parent, that you feel that your kid understands the value system in your home?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it leads us to more questions. And so one thing I value a lot, and that sometimes we miss a little bit in some of these conversations, is us as the adults feeling like we need to give all the information to our children. And so it becomes sort of a lecture. And so what I'm hoping and sort of suggesting to people is that we can actually sit back and ask more questions. So somewhere along the line of like, tell me what you're hoping. So when you say you want to be upstairs with this friend of yours, what does that mean to you? What does that look like? Talk to me about some of the things that, like, could possibly happen when you and this friend are in your room together. And so asking questions without judgment, without jumping down their throats with any of the answers, allows them to share with you, hopefully be as honest as possible, and then start thinking about potential consequences or just scenarios of like, what could happen and what do I want to do about it? And something I want to bring up too, I don't know if we'll get the chance to talk about this later, but when it comes to trust and openness with our children, is I feel it's really important to have a safety plan. So our children know that if they do go to a party, or they are in a situation where there is alcohol, or where they're in a sexual situation that does not feel safe, does not feel right to them, that they can come to us judgment-free, punishment-free, and we will be there for them. So I know families do it all kinds of ways, but I know some that have sort of a safe word. They text their parent, it could be help, but it could also be like banana, whatever it is, or that phone call, and the parent will drop everything and come. And I don't want to say no questions asked, because I would probably have a lot of questions and want to make sure my child was safe, but that parent will be there for you no matter what. So they know they always have that safety net.
That's great. Before we move on to the next age group, 16 to 17, I mean, is it fair for a parent to say to a kid under 16, you really should not be having sex? I mean, we know from the research with alcohol, when parents say, we do not condone you having underage drinking, the research really does promote that is better for the child, instead of giving, saying, well, you can have a sip with us here so that you can, we can know how you are with alcohol. That's against what, the research shows. So I'm wondering what the research might indicate when it comes to sex, if condoning it at such a young age, and I'm saying before 16, like what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think research actually shows that young people who are most informed and educated around sex tend to make the healthiest choices, because they know what it is, they know what it means, they're less likely to get themselves in a situation where they may contract an STI, where one might become pregnant. So actually being informed is the most important thing we can help our young people with. So that's a little different than saying giving permission or saying, no, you may absolutely not. But offering them the information, accurate information, access to that, and then access to safety measures as well, is the best predictor of healthy outcomes. But again, that's not me saying you should all give your children permission at 16 to have sex. That feels a little different. But giving the right information is the most important thing.
Okay, I really love that. Thank you. That's really good information. So let's move on then to mid-adolescence, 16 and 17-year-olds, and talking about promoting safe sexual practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So our 16 and 17-year-olds are making their way through high school. They are more likely to maybe be going to parties or going to friends' houses and having alone time, and probably engaging in different sexual activities, experimenting a little bit. And so we do want to make sure they understand legal and ethical aspects of what that means. And that makes me think about age differences too, and what's appropriate and what's legal. And just encourage responsible choices. So the reality is our 16, 17-year-olds are going to be making their own choices, regardless of what we say they can or cannot do. And we just want to make sure they're making the healthiest and safest choices for themselves. Sexuality and identity we have on here, and listen, that could be a whole other talk. I almost don't want to dive into it because I feel it's so important. But being open to talking about sexual orientation and gender identity when we are having these conversations about sex and health is just so important to me. I think we don't want to assume what our child's sexual orientation and gender identity is, but it's okay to always ask and to keep asking, because that answer may change over time. And when we're talking about sex, again, when we think back to that big sex talk, we think about vaginal intercourse, right? We think about the boy has sex with the girl and the girl gets pregnant and it's the end of the world. When in reality, that's not the situation for all of our young people. And so we want to be thinking about all kinds of identities, all kinds of bodies, using inclusive language. And again, like I said, like we can't just assume we know our children all the time, and it's so healthy to be asking. And again, this is a situation where maybe if our child isn't totally ready to be coming out or to be talking, engage, watching shows with them, having books around the house that show that you are open to different gender identities is really important, because they are going to see those as little hints of your openness and your curiosity.
Yeah, and the true acceptance from their parent, the most important person in their young life, to feel accepted. And so that inclusion, you talk about being able to see that in movies and in conversations. What are some other ways that you can really promote that acceptance and that inclusion for your unique child?
You can say it if you want, if you're comfortable saying it at different points, and say it over and over again. Just say, I love you for who you are. By the way, you can be any gender identity, you can have any sexual orientation, and I love you and accept you, and I'm here for you, and I'm ready. I think that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
thinking about what representation you're looking at. So thinking about your own social media, your own Instagram feed. What are the bodies you're seeing? What are the sexual identities you're seeing? What are the genders you're seeing? When you're just scrolling through and your own children are looking at what your feed looks like. What are you consuming as an adult? What shows are you watching that they're noticing? What books are you reading? What podcasts do you have on in the car while your kids are watching, or listening, while you're driving them around somewhere? I think all of those things are sort of clues to show where we are all at in our progress and our thinking, and what we're open to learning about and wanting to know about our children.
Great clues. Great clues. I want to talk about encouraging emotional well-being, but I do want to let everybody know that there's so much information that's packed in here that you're going to be able to download all of this. So don't worry if you miss something, just listen, because you'll be able to download it. I mean, you have such a wealth of amazing information that I just want people to know that. But let's talk about kind of encouraging that emotional well-being in connection to sex.
Yeah, we have so many aspects of our health, and I think we as a society focus so much on our physical health, sort of like our medical health. So our bodies, going to the doctor for checkups, making sure we're eating well and sleeping well and exercising. But the reality is we have so many different aspects of health and wellness. And emotional health is one of those. Social health is one of those. What are our relationships like? Do we have strong, healthy relationships in our life? And yeah, I think we have to be looking at all of those as components of our overall health. And emotional health, yeah, is just so absolutely important. And we sort of talked before about talking about feelings as little kids with our little kids, and just continuing to build on that. And I think practicing it in our own lives and with our own partners, if we have partners, with our own friends, and modeling that for young people, and really just valuing our emotional health. So if you as a parent are having a hard time, it's okay to talk to your child about that too, and say, listen, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time, here's how it feels, here's why, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Because mental and emotional health, everybody has it. Everybody has a vast array of emotions, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's how we cope and how we manage those emotions that is what shows us the strength of our mental or emotional health.
And I mean, is it okay to, when you're talking to your teen about, giving all that information and kind of including the fact that, the emotions really get involved in this. This is something I can talk to, I can really tell you about, and not as a warning, but more as that education that you talk about, that things really are different when you decide to have sex.
Yeah, it's an important conversation. And we have no way of knowing how we might feel after after a young person engages in a sexual activity with another person. And so really having that open dialogue and being able to talk to your child about the feelings that come along with that is so important, because what happens if they have a sexual experience and it's actually a negative one? What are they going to do with that? Have you created the relationship where they can talk to you about that? And maybe it is even a safety issue, or maybe it's just not a great relationship, not a great situation. And you need to help teach your child how to sort of extract themselves from that in a healthy way. It's so critically important to continue to explore and to talk to your child about how feelings may change throughout the course of a relationship.
Well, and let's talk about how the feelings may change and then that ongoing consent. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so consent is just, I talk more and more about this with the young people in my lives, and consent is a thing. What is consent? Consent is an agreement. It's saying yes to something, and it's saying it wholeheartedly. And the thing about consent is that you can also change your mind and you can say no, which is hard for young people. Sometimes once you've sort of set out on a certain course, it's hard to say, oh, wait a minute, actually, my mind has changed and I want to say no. So it's really important to provide our young people with that information, that you can change your mind at any point and that's okay. And let's practice how to say no. I think as women too, sometimes we have a harder time saying no to things. That's just the society and the way culture has sort of raised us. It's harder to say no. We want to be people pleasers. We want to make people happy. We want to emotionally take care of people. So practicing and learning how to advocate for ourselves and say no is absolutely important.
So, talk a little bit about if a parent isn't really sure, about that relationship, what are some kind of signs of an unhealthy relationship that we might miss as a parent?
Um, and just to clarify, you're talking about our child who might be in a relationship with
That's
someone.
right. Yes.
Yeah, I think seeing our child sort of shut down or not having a voice in a lot of what's going on. Sometimes we see our children in a relationship where the other person is sort of making all the plans, making all the decisions. It feels very one-sided. That can be a little bit scary. That can kind of be a sign that that relationship is not exactly a fair, equitable, respectful one. That's something we'd want to look out for. And I think anytime you see any big changes in your child, whether that be things you want to look out for are sleep, are their sleep patterns changing, their sort of joy and vivacity for life and their passions, is that changing? Are they suddenly not engaging in the things that they used to love because maybe their partner has influenced them in a different kind of way? Are grades dropping or slipping? Those are all sort of red flags you'd want to look out for that are indicating that your child is not in a healthy place. And that relationship, I would want to explore that very much.
Let's talk about the whole online digital part of sex. I think that, of course, our generation, we didn't have to worry about sexting or sextortion. And honestly, you're hearing about it. I don't know the data on it, but it's there, and it's happening. And I'm wondering from you, is there any way to ever normalize that? I mean, if to tell your child, it's really not a good idea to do for X, Y, and Z, is there any instance where a parent would think it's okay? Sexting?
Oh, good question. I've never come across a parent who thought that was a good idea. I don't know, but I hear you. We are in a little bit of a scary place when it comes to the digital world and sexual safety for our young people. So much is happening through texting, through social media, and these teens are at an age where we can't necessarily be with them every step of the way anymore. I don't know your experience, but when your children first got their iPhones for the first time, there might have been a lot of oversight, a lot of sharing of what they were doing. But 16 and 17-year-olds are just in a different place. There's a lot more autonomy. There's a lot more independence. So it's hard, it's scary, but really, I think helping young people learn what the laws and legality of some of this is incredibly important. Understanding that our digital footprint is permanent. So sending something, once it's sent out, it is no longer in our control, and we really lose control of that is quite scary. Again, there are a lot of really wonderful resources around this. There's a website that I use all of the time called amaze.org, and it is a collection of videos with all health and sex ed topics, with some sections for parents and many sections for young people and teens. And they have some wonderful information about digital safety, about sexting. And we bring up pornography here as well. And I think we absolutely have to mention pornography, because the reality, as much as we don't want to admit it, is that most of our young people have seen pornography, whether they intended to or not. A lot of the times it's accidental, but the exposure rate is just so high. And we don't want our young people to be learning about sex from pornography. So I think it's absolutely important that we have some conversation with them, letting them know that pornography is not real life, that it is fantasy, it is make-believe. There are a lot of harmful situations, relationships, racial implications that happen in the world of pornography. And we don't want our young people to be learning from that. We want the first place they're learning is to be from us. And I feel really strongly about that. And it's hard. And so we want to be open with that, and we want to not shame our children in case they have seen pornography, or in case maybe they watch or consume it regularly, but really break it down with them, and help them understand why that could be an unhealthy or unsafe way of gaining information and experience.
I just want to follow up on that, because you said that a lot of kids are seeing it regularly. And honestly, the research shows it, that they're seeing it a lot, and it's a habit. So for a parent in that scenario, I mean, don't you have to intervene? I mean, like what is, if it's just a one time that something had happened, but if you know that this is an ongoing thing, which we do know is happening to our youth, and then that aspect of what it's doing to women, as well. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, pornography often depicts women in very very sexist, masochistic, non-feminist ways. Let's put it that way. I'm not finding all the language for it right now. Very demeaning, and often is just absolutely sexualizing women and showing men as powerful, showing women as weak, and just making women as sexual objects. And so for our young teens who are identifying as girls, we don't want that to be the model for them growing up. We want our young women to be growing up empowered and strong and with high self-esteem, and as equal partners in, let's say, a heteronormative, heterosexual relationship. We want there to be equality in those relationships, and health and goodness in those relationships. We don't want our young women to be sex objects. So we really do want to intervene and educate there. To go back to your question about what happens if we discover that our child, say, has an addiction to pornography, that's a situation where I would seek out an expert to help me as a parent. Absolutely. And that's something I want to say about a lot of the topics that we're covering tonight, is it's not all you. Is that you want to build a community, you want to build a team of trusted adults around you, that you can go to for help, and that your child can talk to as well. I want to bring up this example. I had a best friend growing up, and her mom was the one that I would go to ask embarrassing questions, or to ask questions about sex, or to say, I heard this word and I have no idea what it is. Can you help me? And she would answer without shame. She would answer very factually, sort of scientifically. And I want to be that person for other people in my life, for my friends' children, for other people's children. I want to be my friend's mom. And so strive to, and I say that because you don't have to do it alone. You want to build your network, and you want to help your child identify who are those other people in your life that you're ready to go to have some hard conversations. Like, do you want to talk to your coach about that one? Do you want to talk to your dad about that one? Do you want to talk to Uncle Max about that one? So it doesn't have to be you alone.
I love this because it really takes away that kind of anxiety for parents, but also maybe the shame factor that some people deal with. And just like you would want to build, adults, a community around your child for other things in life, to use that community for this, now that gives me a great idea for my boys to maybe talk to their older cousins who are in their, mid-20s. So I think that is really important to bring people in here who will support your teen. That's really good information. We've talked a lot about consent in that kind of area. Is there anything else before we move on from consent that you think is important that we haven't kind of covered right now?
A million things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's move on to the next slide so I can see what's on there. I mean, truly, I could talk to you about this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we would not.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to practicing healthy relationships.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that you said that, because then our first slide is about promoting body positivity and self-esteem. So to me, that is the relationship with self. So we're talking a lot about how we want our young people to build healthy relationships so that they can have really healthy, pleasure-filled sexual lives, right? But the first step in that is for our young people to know themselves, to feel good about themselves, to have high self-esteem, to have confidence in themselves, so they feel confident in making their own decisions and what feels good and right for them. So this, we see here this term body positivity, and that's accepting and loving one's body as it is. And I might even want to edit that a little bit and call it body acceptance or body neutrality. So these are some newer terms that I've heard. So I say that because body positivity, we don't have to love our body every single second of every single day, because that might feel a little unrealistic. But having acceptance for our body, or having neutrality about our bodies, is a little bit of a perspective shift, and being grateful for how our bodies move, taking care of our health, and feeling good about our bodies and feeling okay about our bodies is really important. We don't have to love our body every single moment of every single day.
Talk about self-esteem in that. And in my mind, self-esteem comes from outside factors, environment, people. But when you level up on self-esteem, you're really talking about self-love. And I wonder, from your perspective, explaining this to a teen, to love their body as their body is. Let's talk about self-esteem, self-love in that realm.
It can be so hard because our teens are being inundated through social media with different representations of what they believe they should look like. So we are constantly seeing celebrities with sort of unrealistic beauty standards and feeling like that is the way we are meant to look. That is the way we are supposed to look. So often we get stuck in these mindsets of feeling like we constantly have to change ourselves or our bodies instead of being accepting of the body we were born with. And something I say to my kids all the time is every body is different and every body is beautiful. There's actually a really lovely children's book I found recently that's called Everybody is Beautiful. But it's so hard when we're being inundated with that. So again, I go back to this idea of how are we curating what we're seeing on a daily basis, both for our teens, but for ourselves too. And even in my own life and my own practice, I've been very thoughtful recently about who I'm following, what they look like, what they're promoting, so that when I'm scrolling through and my child's looking over my shoulder, what different representations of bodies are they seeing? Are they seeing all able-bodied people? Are they seeing all white, skinny women, blonde-haired? No, not anymore. That might have been the case at one point, but not anymore. And so that's something that I think is really, really important and really reinforcing for our children that everybody is different, everybody is beautiful, and you don't need to change your body at all to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, and it's something that is so prevalent in their lives with social media and this concept that these perfect faces and images. And it's interesting, I don't know if you saw this recently, where Pamela Anderson went like without any makeup, and she's trying to kind of say, I accept myself for who I am, but this is a grown woman, right, who was this image of perfection and beauty for some people in this world, a lot of, people in this world. And she is now, going out in public without any makeup on to promote that self-love. But she's a lot older and has gone through life. And so, but we've got these teens who are inundated. And so do you believe that social media should be monitored more exclusively for our girls in particular because of the research that we are finding? We know that it's damaging to them. We know this.
I'll do a little reframe and I'll say, instead of saying monitored, let's say shared. So how about if as parents with our teen girls, we were able to share more in what they were looking at and what they were seeing every day, and we were able to ask exploratory questions. We were able to say, oh, look at that person. This is what I'm noticing. I wonder why. Oh, I noticed when you're going through your feed, I'm seeing a lot of these celebrities. They all look the same. Isn't that interesting? Oh, have you ever heard of this other person who's promoting this other thing, or who sees things a little differently? So sort of sharing in the curiosity, being able to point out what you're seeing to them that could be problematic, and asking questions to help them come up with the answers and come up with their own empowering thoughts about it.
Talk about parent being a positive role model in all of this.
Oh gosh, yeah, so important, right? And I think if we pause, and I should only speak from my experience, but I have to believe this is the experience of many parents, maybe especially mothers, those who identify as women, but we are so critical of ourselves every day. I mean, if you think about looking in the mirror and sort of like the way you're holding your body, or trying to make a shirt fit the right way, or saying, oh, I'm having such a bad hair day, or like, oh, look at like, I look fat in these pants. I mean, everything we're saying, our children are picking up on. And that is not modeling what we actually want for them, which is to have acceptance for their bodies, to be able to wear what makes them feel good and proud and beautiful. And so I don't say that to make anyone feel bad. I do it all the time, but this thinking has allowed me to check myself a little bit and just be more mindful of what I'm saying in front of my children, and then how I'm feeling about myself. So I'm finding my own shift in, oh my gosh, if I want this for my children, how am I actually going to believe this and enact this for myself and change things for the way I view my own body, just based on the way I was raised, that I thought I was supposed to look a certain way, like I think many of us were.
Absolutely. And I think that that modeling portion of it cannot be lightened, because anything that you model for your kids, I know for me, modeling emotional regulation, when I mess up, you gotta kind of own it. And so I think that all of this is, they're watching us, they're really, really watching us. And look, I think it's a journey as a family together to kind of work this out. We're all kind of evolving human beings. And so I think that the sex realm is kind of a good reminder that, we've got to be open to all of us evolving for the best health for our teens, our kids.
I think that's beautifully said. Yes. And I think it fits right into setting a positive example when it comes to our own relationships. And I just want to point out something you said is like, we're going to mess up, right? Because we're human. But how do we want to deal with the mess up? Do we want to cover it up and never talk about it? Or do we kind of want to dive into it and talk to our teens and say, hey, the way I reacted to that, I don't really want to do that again. That didn't feel good for me. I bet that didn't feel good for you. Here's what I want to try differently next time. And that exactly speaks to the growth and evolution that you're talking about. That's going to show our teens that we are open to evolving and growing as well. And so here, when we're talking about practicing healthy relationships, absolutely, we want to try to be modeling for our children what a healthy communicative relationship looks like. But I also want to say that conflict is okay. Conflict is healthy. It's how do we manage that conflict? When I get into an argument with my spouse, are we screaming at each other? Are we putting each other down with our words? Are we walking away from each other? Or are we having a heated discussion, but also listening, also interacting, also doing our best to have some calmness or have some strategies where we're coping? And are we using conflict resolution to come to a healthier, safer place? And then do we want to kind of talk to our kids about that after? Or have they listened from the other room to a big blow up and we're never going to talk about it again? So conflict is healthy. We have to disagree as humans to learn, right? So how can we do that in a way that's going to teach our kids some good life skills?
Life skills, learning over and over again. It's
Sex ed is life skills. I really do think it is. And I wish it were just integrated more in our children's education at school. I know it is in some places, but I think it would be so valuable if it was talked about in some different areas.
for sure. And I also think that when kids are getting these pieces as lessons in school, that parents would be included in, another kind of, educational seminar or something, other than just like, your kids are going to be talking about sex, and do you consent that they can be in this class? So I think, it just helps with the normalization of it all, that this is really a beautiful thing. It's something that should be celebrated. And so I think it's just reframing how we look at it. But I do want to move on, because I want to talk about safe sex practices and addressing, issues that can arise from not safe practices.
Yeah. So I do think in a lot of schools, I guess it depends on where you live and what the curriculum is. I do think a lot of sex ed curriculum at school does address STIs and safe sex practices. So I think it's a good practice to actually either reach out to your school, like you were saying, instead of just signing off on the consent form, say, hey, could you share what resources you're using at school, exactly what the students are learning about? I want to make sure I am learning about it and on board at home, so I can be asking some questions. And then bringing that to your child, and then asking your child, like, what do you think is missing? I think that's a great question for our teens, is like, here's what they know you're learning about in school. What do you think what do you think the school is missing? Like, what do you wish you were learning about? I think that's a great starting point for some questions. But back to STIs and safe practices, safe sex practices. I think it's valuable information for students to know. I think we want to be talking about these things not in a fear-based way. There's a history of saying abstinence only. If you have sex, you will get gonorrhea. You will get chlamydia, you will get all these things. And I think in a way we need to sort of destigmatize STIs a little bit. They are part of the health spectrum when it comes to humans. There are absolutely ways to protect against them, and abstinence, making the choice not to have sex or sexual experiences, is one of those choices.
Okay.
But it's not the only one. And so we want to make sure our young people have all of the options. And also, I think we can be treating STIs as part of our regular general health practices when we're looking at our physical health. So talking to our children about, we go to the pediatrician once a year to have your checkup. This is a different kind of medicine that should be involved and that we need to be keeping an eye on, and we get tested regularly for. So just sort of incorporating that into our lives and our practices, I think, is really important, and not including, as much as we can, trying to take the shame away from it.
Yeah, the shame. Talk a little bit about pregnancy.
Yeah, pregnancy. I don't think we do a great job with menstruation education.
Okay.
I think a lot of it starts there in our young people, and we not fully understanding our bodies and how they work. Because if we didn't want to get pregnant, we wouldn't get pregnant.
Right.
So again, I say that in jest, but I say that because education to me feels like the most important piece. Yes. And I also just want to mention that I think when it, talking about pregnancy, talking about menstruation, talking about STIs, and talking about contraception, I think so much often falls on girls and women. So sort of the burden of contraception often falls to women. And I hope when we're talking to young people, we can be sharing the responsibility. And everyone can have a part in making sure they are fully informed about how the human body works, how to protect every party involved, and that each young person can have a part in protecting themselves and their sexual partner too.
Talk a little bit about, kind of the risk factors when we're talking about STIs and prevention.
The risk factors. So we know that when it comes to sexually transmitted infections, the biggest risk factors tend to be multiple sex partners. Drug use or alcohol use is often a huge component of that. And lack of education. Again, lack of information is a huge piece of that as well. And so we want to trust that our teens are not going to be engaging in risky behaviors, but they might be, and we want them to be as well informed as possible. So we do want to teach them about how to reduce their risk. We want to normalize getting tested. We want to get tested regularly. We can share with our children that we as adults get tested regularly, even if we're not necessarily engaging in sexual activities with multiple partners. We want to talk about using condoms consistently, as that is the lack of using a condom could have major transmission implications. And having a respectful relationship and good communication with with their sexual partner, is also incredibly important. So if your child is getting tested regularly and knows about their own health and knows how to protect themselves, but their partner does not, that does not feel like a safe mix. So we want our young people to have trust in their partner and be able to advocate for themselves, and only engage when they know it's a safe opportunity.
Really quick question before we move on. If you know that your teen is having sex with somebody and you know that person and great kid, the whole thing, would it ever be appropriate for you to, as parent, to talk to them as a couple? Even, I mean, I guess you would have to ask consent from their parent, but is it more meaningful to that couple to know that we're on your side, we want to protect you, here are some preventative measures, or nah? I don't know.
I love the sound of it. Listen, if you are open to doing that, and sharing what you believe as a parent and as a family and sort of your expectations of safety for your child and their partner, I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, who knows how that couple is going to feel about it? It may feel like the most embarrassing, awkward thing they've ever experienced. But so what? I mean, we can survive awkwardness, right? We can tolerate, we're going to be okay, even in embarrassing and awkward situations. So I think it's beautiful. I think if you're able to do that, lovely. I mean, you might need to have a touch point with the parent as well of the other child, but I say go for it. It's showing love and care. It's like what I said about my mom, when we had that sex talk, there was so much about it that was like, I think I would do that a little differently for my own children. And at the same time, it came from such a place of love and care that I have utter respect for it as well.
Well, and that's what's so great about that, is that you acknowledge that and recognize it, and you felt so loved and cared for that it made it not, awkward. So yeah, that's really cool. Let's move on to cultural and religious considerations. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit on this in the beginning, just that every family is different. We all come into parenting from different experiences, from a different lens, from different religions, from different cultures. And I hope that everyone can honor those and bring those into their relationships with their own children. And it's just up to every household in how you do this. And I'm not here to tell you the right way to do anything. I'm not here to tell you the only way to talk to your child about sex, but hopefully I'm here to, again, like open a door to some new thinking and thinking around what our young people are being exposed to and the reality that so much is out of our control. So even though, we want them to be in our home, our cultural little family bubble, and whatever we believe at home are our values, they're being exposed to different things in different places, and we have to relinquish some control of that. So how can we bring in their experiences and still share our own from our family values, and hopefully bring those together in a way that works, and find some compromise, and even though we might not agree all the time, at least we are sharing, and hopefully coming together in some of that. I can imagine when the cultural norms in a family or religious beliefs are really at odds with some of our children's behavior, how difficult that must be for parents and families. And again, that's a place where I would say, make sure you're building your community, your network. You want your child to be able to talk to you, but you want to make sure they have other trusted adults in their lives to talk to as well, so that all the pressure and all the burden is not just on you.
What I've taken from this really pointed, is really building that community around you in this realm that I wouldn't have normally thought to do as a parent. Also these ongoing conversations, I really want to know from you, you're going to have these ongoing conversations, but like how regularly so that it's not, bombarded, but at the same time that you're kind of keeping up with it. I mean, is it just kind of what do you recommend? I mean, is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? I mean, I know I'm asking for specifics, but to kind of keep it in communication, in normalization, without dropping off, but then without being so heavy on it too.
Yeah, this is a place, again, I would go back to like, what show are you watching with your kid once a week?
Okay.
that allows you, there's your answer. That's what I would say. What show are you watching once a week with your child that is going to bring up some of these topics in a way where you can dive in as much as you want, or you can just touch on it, or you can make note of it, or you can say, hey, that reminds me, like, aren't you learning about STIs at school right now? Like, what are you learning about at school again? Like, which ones have you learned about? What do you know about testing? So I just think it provides that something like that could provide that kind of consistency where you have the regular touch point. And all of us are different. Knowing myself, I don't know, I would probably set a reminder for myself on my calendar, like once a month, like, what have I asked my child recently? Maybe I'll check in with the health teacher at school, just find out what they're doing there. Let me think about what events or opportunities are coming up for my child. Like, is it prom? Is it like a big
Right.
party or a big birthday or a big sleepover? I mean, I think a lot happens at sleepovers, honestly. I'm not
Okay.
saying children are having sex at sleepovers, but the conversations that happen there and sort of peers educating each other in not always the most factual ways. I think we want to just be aware of that and be checking in on that too. Also, like, what are children watching together at sleepovers? What social media are they looking at? I think those are things we just want to be thinking about and asking our kids about too.
So good. I mean, this is such a wealth of information. We have so many resources and support that we're going to have that you can download as well. But I want to ask you before I have to let you go, because I know you've got to go, but can you make sex talk fun and silly as a parent, or is it cringy for the kid? Like, I mean, is there a way to open the door to make it just lighter, not so, or by making it silly and funny, I don't know, talk to that.
Oh my gosh, I hope there's a way we can laugh about it. I truly do. And I think that if you are willing to share with your own child how uncomfortable you are, it's going to normalize it for them and give them permission to feel uncomfortable too. And then for you to laugh together about it, which ultimately is going to build your relationship, which is what this whole conversation is about, right? Is having an open dialogue, a healthy relationship with your child, so that they feel safe. They know they can come to you with anything, and they are going to have healthy experiences and be able to make informed decisions themselves. So yes, I hope so. I'm just going to point out, it's in the resources section, but there is a book called, thank you so much, Sex is a Funny Word. It's the last one. It's the last book, a book about bodies, feelings, and you by Corey Silverberg. It's a comic book and it includes humor. And it is a book that is great for adults. I'll be honest, I learned things from this book, even though I think it's directed at teens. And it's something that feels, it lighthearted for teens, yet it's packed with information and is delivered in a way that is not textbook health class. So something like that, I think, would be a great thing to laugh at together.
So awesome. Thank you. Thank you for this education, this amazing education about sex. And I think that as parents, we just kind of have to move through these conversations the best way we can. And I think what you said about just educating ourselves, educating our kids, that's the best bet. That's what research is showing us. And thank you, Ali, for being with us on our bonfire chat. This has been amazing. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Donna.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.